Good morning. If I can call the meeting to order, please. The first order of business is public speaking. Do we have public speakers?
Yes, we do. Good morning. We have two public speakers. The first speaker will be Matt Shotkin, followed by Michael Exter, representative for Council Member Gail Brewer.
Good morning. Jim and Andrew, your ties are very nice. Nancy, your jacket is very nice. Good morning, everybody. Garbage and graffiti on platforms and trains. Totally disgusting. The garbage on the platform with the uncovering of garbage cans makes it really raunchy and really smells. The graffiti on the actual trains, although the graffiti has improved and has gotten less on the subways, the graffiti is still a little noticeable on the insides of the cars, and when you look at the walls or something on the platform and the graffiti is there, it also is totally gross and disgusting. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you. Next speaker is Michael Exter, representative from Council Member Gail Brewer's office.
Hi, my name is Michael Exter, and I'm here on behalf of Council Member Gail Brewer, who unfortunately could not make it because she's right now voting on the proposed budget. But I'd like to read her remarks. Good morning, Chairman Walder, Member Andrew Albert, and other members of the board. My name is Gail A. Brewer, and I represent City Council District 6, which encompasses most of Manhattan's Upper West Side and the northern part of the Clinton neighborhood. Thank you for the opportunity to express my concerns regarding MTA's proposed changes to the schedules for Upper West Side bus routes. Let me begin by saying that I applaud the MTA's effort to more effectively serve the people of New York City and for reducing waste and seeking greater efficiencies, especially given the financial state of our state and city. That being said, my constituents and I strongly oppose significantly increasing wait times for buses on the Upper West Side. As any bus rider can tell you, from their daily experience of jammed aisles and long rides standing up, we rely heavily on public transportation in order to commute to work, visit friends and family, and to experience everything the city has to offer. Given this reliance and heavy use of existing services, the proposed MTA service cuts are baffling. While the proposed delays in service may appear on paper to be relatively small, increasing wait times has a cascading effect on every aspect of life. Buses are then more crowded, although it is difficult to imagine how this could be. Small children are delayed coming home from school, seniors find themselves subjected to long waits and dangerous crowding, and those who need the bus to earn a living have their lives made harder. As you are all aware, traffic congestion service on all local routes in Manhattan, and especially in the crowded Broadway, Columbus, Amsterdam Avenue corridor, and on the connecting crosstown routes. Therefore, a planned
Please conclude your comments.
Therefore, a planned increase of a few minutes in wait time on paper is magnified on the street. A few minutes becomes 10. There are more disabled passengers waiting at stops. Loading times grow much larger. Worsened bunching is inevitable. And I'd like you guys to look specifically at the M104 bus stop, which increases from 20 to 30-minute wait times, which we think is really bad. Thank you for letting me have my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Exter. And this concludes the public speakers.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our public speakers. Before we get started today, I'd like to welcome two new members of our board, Jonathan Ballin and Fernando Ferrer. Both John and Freddie, I think, have distinguished records of public service. We welcome them to the board as members, and I've had the pleasure of getting to begin to know each of them over the last week or two in advance of this. I'd also like to note, of course, that they have replaced two other members, Don Cecil and Doreen Frasca. We thank both Don and Doreen for their distinguished service. We will have an opportunity at a future meeting to recognize their very significant service to this board and to the transit community. With that, may I ask for a vote to approve the minutes of the May board meeting?
Motion made.
Do I have a second? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We turn to the report from the Committee on Finance. Jim Sedor, please.
Good morning. There are three action items. The first action item is
Full service operation.
First action item is for authorization to negotiate with a board-approved counterparty to explore novation of the Citigroup swap described in the board materials and to execute such transaction if negotiations are successful. The committee reviewed and recommended this action, and I move it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The second action item is for authorization and approval in connection with the proposed issuance of the transportation revenue bonds for the MTA to prepare the necessary documentation to issue new money bonds, notes, or other obligations to provide net proceeds sufficient to fund $500 million of the capital projects contained in approved capital plans of transit, bus, and commuter systems. The committee reviewed and recommends this action, and I move it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The third action item is for authorization to pay the state assessment on the MTA and its constituent agencies for the Public Work Enforcement Fund for the calendar 2011. The committee reviewed it, and I recommend it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
There are no non-competitive procurements. There are two competitive procurements in the amount of $155,970. I move these procurements.
Mr. Chairman, I recuse on item F1, the AFT project. Thank
Okay,
you.
if we can note that for the minutes, please. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There are 4 real estate action items this month, which are described in the board materials. I move all the real estate action items.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
This concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thank you very much. We turn to the report from the Transit Committee. Mark LeBeau, please.
The New York City Transit Authority Committee met, and there are 2 action items for this meeting. The first action item is the approval of a construction services agreement at 301-303 East 83rd Street for an not-to-exceed amount of $2,630,000 to accommodate an entrance to the 86th Street station of the 2nd Avenue subway. The committee recommended this item, and I move it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
The second action item is for approval of the following actions relative to the appointment of hearing officers for the Transit Adjudication Bureau. Amend existing retainer agreements with TAB's current panel of hearing officers to amounts not to exceed $30,000 annually, and renew for 1 year the retainer agreements with 2 individuals to serve in the capacity as senior hearing officers. The committee recommended this item, and I move it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There are 5 procurements totaling $53.8 million. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 3 competitive procurements in the amount of $53.1 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And finally, there are 2 ratifications in the amount of $669,634, and the committee recommended these ratifications, and I move them.
Second.
In favor? Opposed?
And this concludes the transit report.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would be remiss if I didn't make a comment about some of the seasonal bus adjustments that were mentioned at both the Transit and the Bus Committee this past month. I am particularly worried about the service cuts scheduled for the M104 because we don't really know where the riders have gone. Is it as a result of the last June 27th service cuts? I mean, that changed a lot of bus riders' habits. Until we know what happened to these riders, if they've in fact gone to other routes, gone to the subway, cutting or even adding further means that we're doing things in a vacuum. In the case of the M104, as you know, last June 27th, the route was cut precipitously from its normal route to Times Square. It used to go to the UN on East 42nd Street, which made it a lot less useful to a lot of the riders. So unless we know why people are either deserting or going to other buses, I think we shouldn't be doing any tinkering. And President Prendergast has said that we will have a report on these issues by the next Transit Committee meeting. So, right now we're dealing in a vacuum. Maybe people have left the bus, but we ought to find out if it's because the bus was cut back on June 27th, if its route was shortened and that affected its ridership, and I'm sure this applies to a lot of the other buses that we're quote, tinkering with. So I want to go on record as saying I think we should have facts before we do things, both adding or cutting service. And we don't have those facts at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah. Jeff?
I guess I just want to point out I happen to agree slightly with Andrew, but the same sort of premises is that on one thing we've been working and waiting for Transit, who I know is eagerly in putting together the package, is in fact the impact of the June 27th from last year's service cuts. Because it is important for us to know what worked, what didn't work, and to approach it on a holistic basis rather than an ad hoc basis. And that's my only concern, is that as we continue to look at the service guidelines, and this board has passed service guidelines to give staff the ability to make those changes, because it's completely unrealistic to go through, probably it's legal, obviously, and unrealistic to go through hearings and all the like for every little change, but in fact we made decisions as a board, and I just want to make sure that we can see the outcome of that and how that impacts the service cuts.
And I appreciate that point. I think the point's well stated about the need for that. We will be bringing that back to the Transit Committee. I think it's actually scheduled for the first meeting we have in September. Is that right, Tom? And so we will be bringing it back. We will have a robust discussion of that, and we will have that discussion in advance of other things. I do believe that it is an important aspect of what we do to continue to think about our system as dynamic, to be able to make adjustments in both directions. The board went through a process, I think, for many years of making adjustments that were primarily on the upside because of growth that was taking place in the city, and we have to be aware of the ability to go in both directions at various times, but also to change with an evolving city. But I think the point being made by both of you, well taken, is that we need to have a comprehensive discussion of the impact of those service changes. We haven't been able to have it without having all the data and having some time to be able to evaluate that, and we will have that in the coming month. So no question about that. My notes say to me that there are no action items from the bus committee. So unless you have something else, we will... we will move to the rail committee. I think, Jim, you're doing double duty, right?
Yeah, there is one action item. The action item is to authorize a public hearing with regard to setting fares for Fairfield Metro Center Station in conjunction with the opening of the new station in October of 2011. The committee recommends this action, and I move it.
Second.
In favor? Opposed? Thank you.
There is one non-competitive procurement for the Long Island Railroad in the amount of $21,420. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There are three competitive procurements, one each for the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and the MTA Capital Construction Company, in a total amount of $33.8 million. The committee reviewed these and recommends this procurement, and I move them.
Second.
I'm sorry,
Can I
Jeff.
ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know I missed the committee. The $25 million contract to Oliver Wyman, how's that being funded? Is that a capital?
It's a capital.
Oh, it is being funded out of capital.
It's capital.
Okay.
And I think there was a long discussion at the committee
Okay.
about it, but it really is an effort to be able to look at what we're doing in some of our rolling stock and see whether we can reduce the cost and improve the effectiveness of some of that.
Okay, there's...
I think I have a motion and a second, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't think I have a vote. In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There is one ratification for the Long Island Railroad in the amount of $367,505. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
This concludes the Railroad Committee meeting.
Okay. Report from Bridges and Tunnels. Mr. Capelli, wherever you are. There.
Bridges and Tunnels Committee met this month and recommends the following. Okay. Is that better? Okay. First of all, there are no non-competitive procurements. There is one competitive procurement that requests authorization for Bridges and Tunnels to enter into an RFP process for design build services in an amount to be determined. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
In favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. There are no ratifications, and that concludes my report.
Okay. I think, by the way, I should point out that I think the design build is for a specific facility, but I think the use of design build and the way in which we're looking at different ways of managing our capital program is all around an effort to be able to reduce the costs and reduce the impacts on customers from doing that. We have some experience, in particular on the Long Island Railroad, with the Atlantic Viaduct project that I think was just terrific and really an award-winning project that allowed us to save money and reduce time and therefore reduce impacts on customers. And it's exactly the sort of thing that we need to be doing across our entire organization to find the best ways to be able to do this, particularly in difficult times to be able to fund capital work. Our last item of business is the Diversity Committee. Susan Mesker, please.
On behalf of the Diversity Committee, I have one action item for the board. That item is to authorize MTA to establish a 17% goal for its utilization of disadvantaged business enterprises in its agency-wide contracting activities on federally assisted contracts for federal fiscal years 2012 to 2014. The committee has recommended this item, and I move it.
Second.
In favor? Opposed? Andrew?
I just wanted to, I should know this from having sat on the Diversity Committee for so many years, but what is this going up from? 17% up from what?
17%, this is different in a number of ways. When you were on the committee, we set the goal every year. Now we're setting a 3-year goal. This 17% goal is the same as we've had in the last year. However, we didn't meet the goal in the last year. By applying the federal requirements for how this goal is set, and by looking at our past history, we believe it is meetable this year. Our first quarter attainment was 17.8%, so the Office of Civil Rights believes that this is attainable, and I believe it is too.
And that includes the use of subcontractors?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
Did we take a vote?
No, I think they're kind of good.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Can we vote, please? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I would point out, by the way, I think toward the point that Susan's making, I think setting goals is one part of the process, but actually monitoring and being diligent in terms of the achievement of those goals, I think, is a different part of the process. Both the work that Michael Garner and all the people at the agencies do on a routine basis to be able to do this, and also in addition to the work we're doing at the Diversity Committee, we have added the monitoring of our achievement of DBE and MWBE goals, minority and women-owned business enterprises, to the work of the CPOC Committee, and we do deal with this on a regular basis. Like many other things we do, achievement in one quarter doesn't imply achievement in another quarter. And so it requires, vigilance, I think, that is continuous on the part of the organization. It requires a set of cooperation across the organization to really make this happen. I think we're being well recognized for that, and I'm proud of that, and I think we've made some real strides, but we can never take our foot off the pedal of what we're trying to do in this area, because the results will fall off at any point that we do that.
I'd also like to point out that the staff has made me and the entire committee aware of the fact that our funding going forward for capital projects is tenuous. And it may be necessary for us to come back to the board after a reevaluation if the funding is not as the agencies have predicted it will go. And I'm hopeful that that won't be necessary.
I think that concludes the regular business of the meeting. May I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
In favor? Thank you very much. Good morning. Nice sunny day. Short meeting. Okay, what do we got?
I guess I'll ask the elevator and escalator question since T.Y. isn't here. We've talked about them a lot, the ones that are broken, the ones that are routinely broken. In the past, you've said it's a matter of ordering the equipment, and today I read that we need to hire a chief of elevators an escalator repair. Why do we need another manager?
Yeah, I think what I've said in the past, I hope was very clear. I said, first off, that I am not satisfied, the people are not satisfied with the performance in terms of escalators and elevators, and I've tried to be very, very clear about that. What I had said was that we would come back to the board with a comprehensive plan for how we were going to deal with this, and that we needed to make sure that we weren't just hitting this piecemeal. In doing that, what Tom Prendergast and his team presented to the Transit Committee on Monday was a plan that changes the leadership and the management structure of that organization. We need to do that. It puts in place different maintenance activities. It adds an overhaul program, which has not been there. We need to make sure that we're not just fighting the fires, but we're preventing them from happening as well, and that needs to be part of the practice of what we're doing. And it concentrates on getting effective training, both in terms of the repair and maintenance of equipment, but also in terms of the use of the computerized information systems that we've put in place as well. I think that was laid out to the board. I think it's the right approach that's been laid out. I think it's our responsibility right now to execute against that and to show a change in the performance that's there. I think the board and I have made it clear to Tom and to the management team at Transit that where we stand in this is not acceptable. So there's no question about that. But we've always said we would approach it in this way. We've done exactly what we said we would do. We've come back to the board. Now it's about delivering.
Is it a new position or it's a restructuring?
It's a restructure. It's not a new position. It's a restructuring. But it, we need to make sure we have the appropriate leadership there. But we also need to make sure that we put alongside that leadership the right abilities to be able to get the things done and to be able to do it. It's not been a program that we can be proud of right now.
How will you gauge success? What metric are you unhappy with, and when do you expect or hope to see things turning around?
Well, I can turn Tom to talk about the implementation plans. I think the measurement of success will be around the performance statistics that we show on a regular routine basis. And in looking at this, we need to ensure that the reliability of our equipment is greater. We need to be able to ensure that the systems that we've put in place are effectively working. I don't know that we can ever completely prevent situations where equipment breaks down, but we need to make sure that we're taking all the steps to be able to minimize that, and we need to be able to take all the steps to be able to ensure that equipment that does break, if it does break, is placed back into service in a timely fashion. Tom, do you want to speak more about it?
When I returned, one of the highest priorities you placed was on the station environment and improving the customer experience. And elevators and escalators is certainly one element to that. To the point you just raised, Pete, the numbers are the numbers, but as I stated at the TA committee meeting on Monday, if ever there is a report where perception of our customers is out of line with what our reported numbers are, it's there. Because for somebody who rides the system, irrespective of what number says about availability, if they say you partition up, they see an escalator out of service, it has a very lasting impact on them. So we've been looking at the issue for the better part of a year. We've got some extremely dedicated people, knowledgeable people in that particular area. They were tasked in a prior administration with a primary focus on getting out of service escalators back up and running as fast as possible and maximizing availability. And they've almost been too laser focused on that. What do I mean by that? They think very tactically. They respond in a manner to be able to fight a fire and get an escalator back up. But I don't believe the leadership that's there, as good as it is, stands back strategically and looks at the whole set of issues we have in elevators and escalators. We have to have an overhaul program. We have to have a scheduled maintenance system. These are systems we put in place in our other maintenance areas, first in car equipment back in the early 80s, and we had a drastic improvement in the reliability of the car fleet. So these are principles and concepts that have been used time and again in this organization, and for some reason they weren't implemented here. So we need to put somebody in at the leadership position that can support those tactical efforts and make sure they're still being done, but at the same time doing things strategically in terms of aligning resources with needs, and in some cases take an escalator out of service before it fails, do an overhaul on it, have a scheduled maintenance system in place so that we can improve the reliability. These kind of changes take time, but we don't have much time. So we need to accelerate the actions to be able to get escalators back in service, while we also fast-track these issues in terms of getting a better overall strategic approach to elevator inspection and maintenance.
When you say the perception is out of whack with the numbers, are you saying that it's actually better than people think?
The numbers are, I believe, elevator performance is in the mid-90s in terms of, if you would ask anyone, does that align with what their perception is, they tell you no. Because if you ride the system during rush hour and the escalator is out of service only for 2 hours, you may have 22 out of 24 hours in service, which is a high availability. But but from the customer's perspective, it didn't work when they rode it. So there's a disconnect in their mind. Whenever we put a partition up, even if you don't use the escalator, one of the first things we do is you put a partition up so we can do the work on it. It sends a very clear signal to everybody that uses the station, whether you use the escalator or not. The escalator is out of service. So here, perception is reality. We need to get to a point where the numbers and the customer's perception of how often those elevators are in service and available for their use are in alignment. Right now, they're not. The preliminary IG's report that came up this week brought two things to mind. It talked about some ineffectiveness on our part of the use of the LiftNet system, as well as the failures of the relay we have to diagnose and identify those elevators that have stopped moving. I'll take the first issue, which is LiftNet. LiftNet is a very good system. It gives us an ability to have real-time information about the status of an escalator or elevator that's out of service, and it also provides for a new means of being able to track performance data over and above the old manual record-keeping ways. What has happened in the organization is they haven't fully embraced that. Whenever you go from a manual system to an automated system, you've got to retrain people, and they've got to disconnect from the manual system and embrace the automated system, debug it, and make it working very well. The leadership of the organization in elevators and escalators didn't do that. I don't think it was knowingly or willingly, as much as it was they were afraid of going away from the manual record-keeping system. And so we have a system that needs to be debugged, fine-tuned, and then used, and actually migrate totally away from the manual record-keeping system. And we haven't done that yet. On the issue of the relay, well-intended action on the part of an employee to come up with a relay device, tie it to what they call a programmable logic controller, and identify when escalators or elevators were stopped moving, and it could be an entrapment. But unfortunately, we never took it through its paces in a beta test. We have probably 1,000 false reports of an entrapment for every one that actually is an entrapment. So it was a good idea, but it actually wasn't followed through to completion. And it's arguable as to whether or not we should have stayed with that relay as long as we did, but we did. And those are the two items that the IG brought out in that report that really crystallized, the whole issue of why the strategic focus in that particular element of the organization wasn't there.
You've got your mid-year financial plan coming up. Are you still committed to balancing this year's budget and next year's without service cuts or fare hikes?
Yes, very much. We set out a plan to be able to do that, and that's what we're working toward. The management team has been working toward continuing to control costs to reduce our cost structure. I think we'll be showing some success in doing that. I think it continues to be a very big focus of the organization and the way we're doing it. At the same time, as we've been talking about, we're very cognizant of the fact that we need to be able to deliver a first-class quality service and to improve it in a number of areas as well. And the financial plan will reflect all of that.
Do you think anything needs to be done on bus driver safety after last week's attack on the driver?
Well, the safety of our employees, I'm horrified by the attack on the driver, and the safety of all of our employees is critically important to us. This is an issue that I think has been around, if I might say, for a number of years, and both the management of transit and the TWU have been working together in terms of plans to be able to better protect some of the bus drivers. We will have, by the end of this year, 400 shields on 465 buses. that will run across a wide variety of makes and models. It will give us the opportunity for many bus drivers to be able to be in that environment, to test it, to be able to see how that works. It's not one size fits all because each of the bus models are a little bit different. We've been trying to be cognizant in this process of some of the concerns that drivers have. Concerns about glare coming off the plexiglass shield, a sense of restricting their ability of movement and other things of that nature. And so I'm actually happy that we're moving forward with this many buses that are moving forward, and I'd like to see us do everything we can to assure the safety of the drivers.
Are you going to roll that out system-wide? Is that the plan?
The plan would be to roll out system-wide, but again, I think we want to do it in a manner that assures that what we're doing actually meets the needs that are out there, that does protect the drivers, but also leaves our bus drivers with an environment that they feel comfortable in, that allows them to be able to do their job and doesn't impinge upon it. Driving a bus is a difficult job, and we want to make sure that they have the ability to be able to do it safely and effectively in this process.
Did the legislature make the job easier or more difficult this year, this session? Financially speaking.
Well, we moved earlier in the year to deal with the impacts that came out of the budget process, in which we did lose some money in the budget process, and we'll be reflecting that in the financial plan going forward. I think in general the legislature was largely focused on other items than the MTA this year. But we continue to work very closely with both the governor's office and the legislature and try to work through things.
There was something about encouraging Second Avenue neighbors to call their lawmakers and to speak up. Are we going to shift toward maybe involvement from us as riders, where we are going to be campaigning for the continuing of these programs? Is there something that I can do to make sure that the funding is there?
Well, I think the MTA will be very strongly campaigning for the continuation and the completion of our mega projects and the continuation of the work to be able to keep our system in a state of good repair, which is a primary element of what we're doing. We will be a very strong voice to doing that. I always believe that the 8.5 million people who use the subway, bus, and rail systems every single day, the 17 million people who live in a region that is connected because of our transportation system and is able to prosper in great part because of the transportation system, are a very powerful voice. And I hope people will tell everyone how important our transportation system is in this region. We see debates taking place at all levels of government about the way in which we spend public funds and about the importance of that and the decisions that are made in terms of doing that. I absolutely accept the process that we have of doing it. It's an important democratic process. But within that process, I do hope people will bring their voice to the table, but that the MTA will be a very, very strong voice in doing that. It should be our goal, it is our goal, to complete the mega projects, to bring them into service, to show the benefits that come from those projects. We're absolutely going to do that, and also to be able to continue to invest in our existing transit system, which has been a hugely successful capital program over the last 30 years, has restored the reliability of our bus, subway, and commuter rail systems from what they had been in a previous time. And we need to continue to be able to do that because we have assets that wear out and need to be replaced.